People who are adopted and tracked down your real parents. How did it play out? Satisfying? Disappointing? Serious? I was adopted at birth. I can't remember a specific time that I asked if I was adopted or when my parents told me. I've just always known. My birth parents were both 18-wheeler truck drivers with not much of a permanent address, so they decided to put me up for adoption. Growing up they would send birthday or Christmas cards every few years, and then I stopped hearing from them completely for about 5 years. One day I got a random phone call from my birth father stating that my birth mom had lung cancer and she didn't have long to live, and if I was ever going to come meet them, now would be the time. I was devastated that my birth mom was so sick and that these were the terms in which I was going to meet them. They moved into their parents' house in Ohio when they passed. My adopted parents have always been supportive of me having a relationship with my biological parents and understood that I wanted to go meet my family. They went with me and we flew to Ohio a few days after the phone call. We stayed in a hotel that night and the next day I went to meet my biological parents. I will never forget that day, pulling up to their small one-story house with a fenced-in front yard. I got out of the car and they were there waiting for me on the front porch. It was weird, like I know these people, but have never met them. I immediately felt a deep connection with them. It's weird finally seeing the genetics you come from for the first time. My birth mom looked very sick but she still never stopped smiling and cooked one of the best roast beefs I have ever had. I ended up meeting my whole extended family that day. I found out I have 5 half brothers and sisters, and that I am an uncle. I never expected that and my young nieces and nephews were so excited to meet me. I was overwhelmed with emotion and love for these people I hardly knew. I am so glad I got that opportunity to meet them, especially my birth mom. My birth mom passed away November 27, 2011. I unfortunately was unable to make it to the funeral, and I haven't been able to bring myself to go see her grave or contact my birth father or family. I have been to a therapist about this and I plan on finally going up there this November, on the anniversary of her passing. It is something I need to do for closure. Thank you for reading my long rant. I've never really told this story before. I am really hoping to reconnect with my birth family. I would really enjoy having them in my life again. All the adults involved in this story sound like they always had your best interests at heart. I hope your future communication with your birth family brings happiness to you and yours. Never got in touch with my parents, but my biological siblings got in touch with me earlier this year. We had some interesting conversations, and what's interesting is that my birth parents really weren't screw-ups or drug addicts or anything like that. They just wanted their kid to grow up in a stable household, and since they were getting a divorce and I was the product of an attempted reconciliation, they decided to adopt out. Talking with my birth siblings was interesting, but I couldn't really see them as my brothers and sisters because I'm so tightly knit with my 2 younger sisters, one of whom is also adopted. They looked like me, sure, but I couldn't really see them as siblings. They also told me that my birth parents probably wouldn't want to interact with me, and I sort of left it there. I'm a big grizzly bear looking guy in a family full of people smaller than me, but I love them. Family isn't really about genetics anyway. The hardest part about adopting children is teaching them to look like you. My best friend was adopted at a very young age. She got information from the adoption agency about her birth mother and older brother. She looked up her brother on Facebook and arranged a meeting with him. That went extremely well. They immediately bonded. She got her birth mother's phone number and called her. They talked a few times exchanging their life stories and hopes to meet each other soon. Birth mother lived in a different state. After a few weeks of talking over the phone they set up a weekend to meet. The first day they met was filled with hugs, joy, and my friend got to meet her half-brothers. The next few days she got to see how her birth mother really was. She ignored my friend after the first day and was incredibly rude. My friend returned home and realized her birth mother wasn't all she hoped she would be, so she stepped back with contacting her but stayed in contact with her brothers. Her mom, adopted mother, is a wonderful woman and she now realizes how lucky she is to have her. She was disappointed in knowing that she was put up for adoption because her birth mother is a piece of crap, but she is happy she now has a fantastic mother. I actually had a letter from my biological father from when I was 6 months old. and inside of it he told me he loved me. After finishing reading that in the winter of 2011, I was 19 at the time. I was absolutely determined to find him. On the envelope to me was an address. I typed that address into Google, and the adoption agency that my adoption was conducted through came up. I emailed the lady who was in charge of the agency asking for information on my birth father. After a few very long months, she emailed me back with a name. She had everything on him that I could want in terms of contacting him. She had said that the reason it took so long to find him was because she had to confirm that it was in fact him, and he didn't see the message she sent him on Facebook until later. Anyway, I had his contact info, and I found him on Facebook. He and I were chatting for months on end to find out about each other, and we decided to meet up in my hometown. I was away at college at the time, and my hometown was halfway between his town and my college town. So we meet up, and it's incredible. Everything I've ever wanted to know gets answered for me: siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, everything. Well, his kids, my half-siblings, didn't know about my existence. Later on that summer, he messages me on Facebook, saying that he and his wife are going to be telling the kids about me very soon. Within 24 hours, I've received friend requests from all of them. About a week and a half later, I drove down to their house to meet the entire family. I spent 3 days there, meeting all of my relatives. I message with them on Facebook all of the time, and visit frequently, 3 or 4 times a year. I'll actually be going to stay with them for a week during the 4th of July, and I'm stoked. Also, I do not consider his kids as my half-siblings. They are my siblings, and I'm their sibling. I would not trade my relationship I have with them for anything. Just curious if using Facebook to track people down is commonplace in that sort of professional, regulated workplace. Interesting. Adopted at birth. I'm 26 currently and have never wanted to know anything about my biological parents. Last Father's Day of all days, right? I received a Facebook message from a random man asking if I was adopted. Was a few details of his daughter's job. They all matched, and boy did I look like him. We talked a bit. He sent me a picture of his daughter at birth. Yep, that was me. Still not wanting to believe this random man was my biological father, I told him I would contact that adoption center with his name to see if they would give me any information. My adoption was a closed private adoption. The center called me back 3 days later to confirm that this man was my biological father. They confirmed my biological mother's name as well, all over the phone without any verification of anything. I was dumbfounded. I cried, was anger, about every emotion you could think of, informed the biological father that I was indeed his biological daughter, then was told I have 2 biological brothers, one barely a year older than me, and one 4 years younger. Biological mother also has a slew of other kids, as does he, came to a total of 2 siblings, and 9 half-siblings. I grew up an only child. The kicker was that the biological mother is and always has been a drug addict. She lost all her kids. Every one of my siblings is completely fricked up. They all have kids. My teenage half-sister has a 4-year-old. Most have been in jail and have no contact with their parents. I spoke to the biological mother twice. She gave off the piece of crap vibe the second I started talking to her on Facebook, so I blocked her and forgot that ever happened. The biological father wasn't much better emo. He was with a new woman with 3 kids and barely speaks to his biological children from other women. I grew up in a close family. We talk all the time and are involved in each other's lives. This guy claimed to want to get to know me and meet me, talk to me on the phone, blah, 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 but it just never followed through. So I cut those ties and haven't talked to him since either. I have talked to most of my siblings. The younger bio brother and I talk every few months. Half siblings and I talk every few days. I really wanted to get to know them and build relationships with these people that are blood related to me, but they have such terrible sad lives that we really can't keep a conversation going. So it ends up just being a few sentences exchanged every few days about how their lives are crap and what is going wrong now. I'm a positive person, in a good place in my life, and my husband is worried I'm going to get taken advantage of, so I keep my distance. All in all, it was a terribly disappointing situation and I wish it had never happened. My advice, based on experience: prepare yourself for the worst, lower your expectations. Example, Consider the possibility that you are the product of a violation. I was born in a time-place where abortions were illegal. I was in no way prepared for that kind of info, had never considered that possibility. This is good advice. I can't say don't go find your biological parents, because honestly I think curiosity eventually gets the best of us. But don't expect to find out you're a bastard child of Bill Gates or something. I was adopted from Ukraine. I want desperately to find my birth mother, but I fear that it is nearly impossible even if I have her name, just because of the language barrier and little to no technology in the poor parts of Ukraine. I was adopted from Russia in 1993. I know my parents' names, but they're so common that searching will hardly do any good. Likewise, the language barrier makes it even more difficult. I've always wondered if my birth mother has tried to seek me out or not. My mother was adopted. In 2009 her adoptive parents passed away and she decided to in touch with her biological family. It was a very emotional experience. Lots of tears from all involved when we met her bio parents and her 3 brothers and sisters and all their kids. It was crazy to learn where our looks, mannerisms, and even certain personality quirks came from. We are still in regular contact with everyone. They will never replace my grandparents, and we don't have a whole lot in common with them, but they're definitely family. My birth mother found me on the internet in 2005. I had registered on adoption.com 10 years earlier. She had realized she was pregnant after she had broken up with my father and he had moved overseas. She never even told him and he died in 2000, never knowing I existed. I will never meet her again as no one in her family, including possibly her husband, knows about me. We exchange emails and pictures. I despise my HS graduation picture. Worst picture of me ever taken. She found it online and sent me hers from 20 years earlier. We are twins. It is uncanny. She hates hers too. The funny thing is I did some research on ancestry.com for my dad, who has a very unusual Hungarian name. So now I know I am part Hungarian. Turns out he married and had a son who has the same name as me. I emailed that to my birth mother and she wrote back and said she too had another son and he has the same name as me too. Yes, it is a common American name, but still it is funny that I have 2 brothers and we all have the same name. I am now thinking of contacting my dad's son. I have survived cancer and would love to have a little more medical history. Let's use Bill. Bill, son, I'd like you to meet your Uncle Bill and your Uncle Bill. Your uncles were both named after your father, me. Bill, I passed this name on to you, my son, as you shall name all of your sons Bill as well. I may have the gender mixed up. Found my mom and older brother. Neither of them wanted anything to do with me, but it's cool, my adoptive parents are my real family. A lot of these posts and most seem to lean towards their biological parents wanting to meet them. But honestly I would expect the majority people who put kids up for adoption to react like your mom and brother did. In the end you have a real family, so that's what matter anyway. So I found my parents on Facebook a few years back. I was able to find their full names because the adoption agency that sent me letters from them made a mistake and forgot to remove their last name and address for privacy reasons. I sent my birth mother a message on Facebook and ended up talking to her. My birth mother actually married my biological father and had 2 more kids after me, so it's kind of like the family I would have belonged to if I wouldn't have been adopted. I met her once and she is nice. It's a little weird honestly. I consider my mom and dad who adopted me to be my real parents and my birth mom and dad to be my biological parents. So some backstory. When I was like 2 weeks old my mom and dad broke up, and my mom moved back home, halfway across the country, and basically pretended he never existed and started telling everyone this guy she was friends with named Jim that he is my father. Fast forward a few months. My mother is being a crappy mother and leaving me with drunk babysitters all the time, so my grandma comes and takes me away from her, wins custody and all that. Fast forward until grade 3. My grandma gets cancer and dies, but she doesn't want me to end up with my mother, so she gets a family friend to be my legal guardian. Okay, now fast forward some more. I was in 17, in grade 12 and at night school dicking around on Facebook. Not really doing schoolwork when I get this message from this girl a few provinces over that I have no mutual friends with. So I check it and basically it says something along the lines of, "Hi there, my name is so and so, and my dad is named Mike. And if your mother name is so and so then we could be sisters. I am like WTF. Considering I was always told my dad was that gym guy, but I had been told stories of this Mike guy over the years from various family members. I just figured my mom had crap figured out and trusted her. So we messaged back and forth. He got his daughter to message me because he thought I might think he was a creep, and I add her and Mike on Facebook. I talked to them on the phone a few times, but nothing too grand. The following summer Mike, his wife and Danielle come to visit and we decide we need to do a DNA test, since my mother is still claiming that Jim is my dad. We get the DNA test, and Mike turns out to be my dad. Not a very exciting climax, but I am closer to my dad than I ever was with my mother. She still denied it after the DNA results and basically demanded we pay for another one with Jim. I basically told her to grow up. Me and my dad have a great relationship, and I have a whole family I get to go visit twice a year now. I grew up feeling like I was always just an add-on and never really belonged to my guardian's adopted family. I also have 2 half-sisters and a half-brother. My dad still jokes that I'm the only one he knows is actually his. One funny side story, when my dad came to visit me, we ate out a lot, and every single thing that I ordered, he also ordered and we had no prior discussion about it. It became freaky by the end of the week. Sorry this became so long-winded. TL. DR. Sister dad I didn't know I had found me on Facebook. Things went well. I contacted the agency a while ago to get my mother's info. I got her name and her age. After looking online, I was sad to find very little. Flash forward last May, my new BF tracked her down after I showed him the papers. I saw her on FB, and without a doubt, knew. She looked like me, had the same sense of humor, had 2 kids. So I stayed back, out of fear. A few weeks later I get a notification on my Pinterest. You need to search for my real name to get it. I have a tiny group of friends following. It was her. Then the FB request. She was searching for me too. After a funny and awkward chat, OMG do you know me, OMG I'm crapping bricks. We called each other and cried, laughed, and I spoke to my new half sister. My BF was there, holding my hand when I met her after 31 years. I was so nervous I felt sick. I was always told she gave me up, not because she wanted to, because an 18-year-old girl could not provide me the kind of life she wanted for me. I never blamed her, never felt abandoned, and loved her right away. Loved my new extended family right away. My mom has a life similar to my parents. My dad and stepmom haven't met her yet, but are so excited and happy. Country living etc. Haven't met, spoke to my dad. I saw him on FB but not sure if he ever told his spouse about me. I respect his privacy. My mom's trying to talk to him via mutual friends. From only child, I have at least 2 siblings, a bunch of moms. Life is happiest than it's been in a while. Awesome. I'm an adoptive father. I am my daughter's real parent. It was a closed adoption, so we don't have any information on her biological parents. I know it's nitpicky, but I've had people tell me that my daughter isn't really mine and it pisses me off. Any fool with a dong can make a baby, but only a real man can raise his children. From what I've learned, my biological parents were both addicts and small-time criminals. My dad was in and out of jail for drugs and eventually served a full 2 years on domestic violence assault charges against my mom, but she couldn't leave him for some reason, and when he got out, they had me. They managed to keep me for 25 months somehow until they abandoned me in the aisle of a pharmacy. They then proceeded with whatever crappy lives they had. He jumped off a bridge a few days short of 9/11. I was 5 years old and had never known him. My mom followed him 3 years later down the same bridge. I didn't actually track them down. My foster family received the visit of my CPS caseworker and an attorney in July 2004, a few weeks after my mom killed herself. Turns out some collection agency had seized my mother's estate and they found my long-lost birth certificate. The state connected the dots from there. They had a long talk in the kitchen. Then the next day I was brought to an office where I met members of both my biological families with social workers and the attorney. I elected to remain with my foster family. It was the first and last time I saw or talked to any blood relative. The attorney left a box to my foster mom that I was supposed to open when I got old enough. I did so when I turned 15. In it were a bunch of baby pictures and random toys that I assume I played with as a toddler. I threw them away and never looked back. As far as I'm concerned, I only have one real family, and it's the one that took me in as a broken little 2-year-old and raised me as their own. TLDR. Both jumped off the same bridge, 3 years apart, so I'd say a bit disappointing, but also weirdly satisfying. Closure, I guess, and also a bit of resentment. I know it isn't intentional, but I cannot help but be a little upset every time I hear someone refer to my biological parents as my real parents. My real parents are the people that raised me and supported me throughout my life. My adoptive parents. Biological parents is a much better term. I'm referring to the title. Ditto on that one. I typically refer to my biological mother as my incubator. I also knew I was adopted, at least in my memory. There was no point where I remember being told. It was weird cause we lived in the same town as my birth mother and we would often run into her at places like the library when we were much younger. My mom always had to tell me who she was cause I never recognized her. My other 2 brothers are also adopted from the same mother, but my birth mother has some kids of her own that she kept too. When I was about 16, I got a weird complex and really wanted to get to know my birth parents. I soon found out that my birth mother had written a letter to my parents saying that her kids wanted to get to know their siblings and asked if we could all get together. My parents had kept the letter from us because they were afraid my younger brother would react strangely. We did end up finally all getting together maybe about a year later. I was excited and very nervous all at the same time. Strangely enough, it wasn't really anything special. Come to find out that this woman that I had painted a wonderful picture of in my head really wasn't what I was expecting at all. Also, she didn't really feel like my mom at all. She was just the woman who gave birth to me. To this day, the woman who raised me will always be who I consider to be my mother. I keep contact with my birth mom still. We are friends on Facebook and such, but that's about it. Annie and Jean were best friends. It was 1978. I was a gift. You can say no if you want to, but I'm pregnant. Will you take the baby gift? My mom, Jean, and my biological mom, Annie, are 2 of the most amazing women I know. That moment where my mom replied, "I guess I should ask Elmo," my dad, created a world that I've been living in ever since. Thanks for this. There are lots of ways to make a family. I have a younger half sister who was given up for adoption. My mom was a single mother and couldn't afford 3 kids. We've always known about her and she always knew she was adopted. My mom always knew her name and found Get on Facebook before she ever contacted us. My mom had always felt ashamed of herself for giving her up for adoption and still has not. Very shortly after she turned 18 she found us on Facebook. She thanked my mom and told us how much she appreciated the choice my mother made. She had an amazing childhood and couldn't have imagined it any other way. I now talk to her every day. We almost look like twins, which is strange because I don't look like my other siblings. We are really close, and although I wish we had had the first 18 years of her life together, it makes me very happy to know she didn't have to deal with the same struggles I did. I actually had a child I gave up for adoption. When she turned 17 she found me. It was the most exciting, terrifying experience of my life. It was surreal to see all the ways she is like me, physically and personality wise. We speak occasionally but are not close. I think for her it was just out of curiosity to find me. I love her because she is my child, but I am not her mother and essentially she is a stranger to me. I've always known I was adopted, and about 2 years ago I decided to search for my biological mother. The process took some time but was relatively simple. I went to the agency that had adopted me out to my adoptive parents and I had to fill out some paperwork and give them $400 to search for my mother. It took a while for them to get a hold of my bio mom. Then they sent her paperwork to fill out regarding family medical history, and the adoption agency also asked her if she was willing to let me have her contact info. In around November of 2012 I got a phone call while walking back to my car from a class. I remember that walk because I have never been more excited in my life. On the phone the adoption agency told me my biological mom's name and address. Later that night I found her on Facebook and added her. I found out I had 2 younger siblings, a brother and a sister, from looking through her pictures. We started messaging each other and I met her in person just after Christmas. I also met my grandparents, brother, sister, 3 cousins, aunt and other assorted family at the same time. It was a little bit overwhelming but at the same time an amazing experience. Since then I've kept in close contact with my biological family. Meeting them is the best thing that's ever happened in my life. It was not quite what I expected. It turns out my mother died about 20 years ago and that the man I think was my father died earlier this year. I did get a chance to meet some of the extended family and heard the story behind my being put up for adoption. I am not sure I really wanted to know the story. The whole this was a bit depressing but I did get to meet my half sister and we talk all the time. I have an honest question for anyone else who was adopted, like myself. If you have sought out your biological parents, why? I was adopted nearly immediately after birth and have known only one family my entire life. I have one sister, also adopted. My mom passed away when I was 19, currently 27, and I'm still close with my dad. I've honestly never even had the slightest urge to seek out my biological parents and this seems to mystify people when I tell them. For one, it seems like it would be insulting and awkward for my real family, and yes they're my real family. Second, my birth parents have been complete strangers to me now for 27 years. I could have bumped into them a dozen times now for all I know. They made a mistake in high school and made the responsible decision to ensure I had a better life and I did, and for that I'm forever grateful, but that's where our connection ends. Like I said, I personally am content in my decision, but I honestly would love to hear opinions from both sides of this. I had expressed an interest in finding my biological parents after I turned 18. I guess my mother and decided to help, because unbeknownst to me she had made a profile on a website that helps to reconnect adoptees and their biological families. I got an excited phone call from my mother while away at college saying that she had received an email from a woman who claimed to be my birth mother. We exchanged emails and finally met in person when I came back home on break. It was a bit of a strange meeting. She is nice. We have similar personalities but we are very different people. She gave me information on where I can track down my birth father's sister. That meeting was awkward as frick. Apparently his side of the family didn't know I existed and it led to a weird half interrogation in which I'm pretty sure she didn't believe me but managed to relay the message to him anyways. I got a call from him a few weeks later and we met in person. Both birth parents are married with children. My birth mother has 2 daughters currently in high school. My birth father has a little boy who is probably in elementary school by now. In all, they seem like nice people but they are complete strangers. I don't feel any weird family connection to them or anything. They are kind of in the realm of extended family at this point. I have 4 first cousins who were adopted. The 2 oldest are biological brother and sister and I grew up with them. Their mother drove up to a Department of Human Services building on a night and put them out on the pavement telling them that she would be right back. They were very young, I think the oldest was maybe 5 and the youngest was 3. They stayed there hiding and waiting for their mother to return until workers found them on a Monday. They spent many years in foster care. I don't know if they even remembered what she did to them. I know because I read the newspaper article that my gran saved where they were sort of advertised for adoption. My aunt adopted them when they were around 10 and 12. They, as you can imagine, had some issues. They had been abused in the system in pretty much every way possible. The older one, he is a very sweet albeit damaged person. The younger one, she is very manipulative, mean, and a thief. When they were grown, the younger one contacted her biological mother. It turned out she had kept some of their siblings. She moved near her bio mother and they sponge off my aunt a lot. I know at one point my aunt sent my cousin money for a semester at college which she and her bio mother used on who knows what but not college. My cousin now lives on welfare and has several unhappy rude children. My older cousin met their mother too but I think he had more of a memory of her and left it at that. As far as I know he has no interaction with her past her beating to see her and his siblings that she kept. That's horrible. I feel bad for the kids growing up that way and ending up the way they have because of their mom's choices. It just sucks all the way around. I was adopted and found my birth parents a couple of years ago. I found my mom first and sent her an email. It took her over a year to respond because she felt guilty about the whole thing. At least that's what she told me later. After emailing occasionally for a few months, she was willing to tell me my father's name. He was easy enough to find after that. Problem was he had no idea my mom was ever pregnant. I sent him an email asking some general questions just to make sure it was him before I dropped the bomb. But he looked at my pictures on Facebook and apparently told his wife this person is definitely my son. We emailed back and forth and decided to meet up one day at a local pub. We met and talked and he was really cool about the whole I suddenly have a son I didn't know about for 25 years thing. The thing I find most interesting is that I am an awesome example of nature versus nurture. My adoptive parents were always trying to make me go outside and play sports, when all I wanted to do was stay inside and play video games. My biological dad loves video games, comics, sci-fi, and D&D just like me. Also, I thought it was funny that when we met he randomly had a D&D miniature in his jacket pocket and I randomly had a D20. All in all, a good experience and I'm glad I got in contact with them. TLDR, nerdiness is in your genes apparently. I reached out 6 months after my 18th birthday about 10 years ago. Birth mother responded with a serious nasty gram saying that I was the biggest mistake of her life and that she wished I had died. My adoptive parents, birth mother gave me up at birth and I was in foster care for a year, are the most wonderful people on the planet. I knew from about age 8 I was adopted. They never hid it from me, but they allowed me to ask questions instead of laying it all on me at once. It wasn't obvious I was adopted. I'm the same race as my adoptive parents and I kinda look like them. They have been supportive in my search as I'm just trying to find non-identifying information about my biological parents. But if my bio siblings wanted contact, I'd be okay with it. Whoa, what a horrible thing to say. She could have just declined to answer. So glad to know you have a wonderful family around you to remind you how loved and wanted you are. I was adopted at birth and recently just celebrated my 21st gotcha day. Right before I went to bed, my mom awkwardly walked in with a gift bag and handed it to me. You may never read it, but I did it for you. She had kept a journal for the past 21 years, supposedly, detailing all the little special moments in my life up to this point. I cried and hugged her for a long time before she went to bed. I set it on the table and stared at it through tears for at least an hour before I turned off the light and went to bed. 2 days later, it's still sitting on the table. I'll read it someday, sooner rather than later. But the little blue book was proof to me that my adoptive mother was and always will be my real mom. I am so grateful to my birth mother who gave me the chance to be raised by my incredible family, but I'm truly thankful for my mom, the most beautiful woman I know. I had thoughts of finding my birth family, and with my agency I can start looking now that I'm 21. But after receiving this journal, I don't care anymore. I've gotten all the confirmation I've ever needed. My mother was adopted and recently we all decided that we would try to track the birth parents down for medical reasons. We had to jump through several hoops and wait, if I recall correctly, 6 weeks just to have someone say okay, we've got your paperwork. It'll be several more weeks until I can contact them. Well, we all waited and finally the lady got back to my mother and said that she contacted the family and the woman's son said they were not interested in any communication. It was extremely disappointing. All we wanted was to know if we have any medical issues or anything like that. So long story short, I guess my birth uncle is in butthole. Maybe there's some wicked inheritance he doesn't want you in on. Can't talk for myself, but I can talk for my best friend of 10 years. He learned he had a half sister when he was 15 when she came knocking on the door when he was playing piano. She commented on the song and they talked for half an hour before he realized he didn't know who she was. He then asked her why she was here, politely, and she said, "Oh, could you go get your mom?" It went on from there and she turned out to be an incredibly nice lady with a very nice family, husband and children, along with very cool adoptive parents, and my friend's parents are the bomb. His dad even refers to the half-daughter as his daughter, respectively, and they all get together for Christmas. It's all quite lovely really. She found a mom on Facebook and messaged here. She was the only one who knew she was coming over, as she was on a trip from Florida. I was adopted from Seoul, Korea at about 8 months. I was told my birth mother tried to keep me but simply couldn't provide. I've always wondered what she looked like and what kind of woman she was. I've never wanted to reach out and meet her though. Maybe when I was younger, but that doesn't appeal to me anymore. If I could just get a picture I'd be happy. Anyways, just recently I was reading through some of my paperwork and it stated that my birth parents were not together and my birth father was a married man. Age difference was kind of big, she was 20 and he was 31. My birth mom did not know he was married though and tried to raise me herself when he wouldn't help. I never knew that and it upset me quite a bit. I always just assumed she was young and dumb. I almost feel like I'd make her sad if she ever saw me again. You know, bring back ugly memories. I've always had strong morals though and hated cheaters with all my heart, so I feel maybe I got that from her. Also says she was very tall and good at pool. She gave me that also. I'd love to thank her for giving me a better life and let her know that I'm doing just fine. I'm sure our paths will never cross though. Also, as others have stated, my adoptive parents are my real parents. My mom used to always ask if I ever wondered about my birth mom or would choose her over this life, and my reply will forever be a no. I love the people who watched me grow and helped mold me into the woman I am today. I never cared when people asked why my mom was white or why I didn't look like them. In my heart I knew none of that mattered. Maybe they would never understand, and that's okay. They didn't need to. At 6 months a baby starts to need more than milk and a place to sleep. They start to get interested in toys and baby food. A parent would need to start baby-proofing the surroundings, get new clothes, toys, and more. If you were adopted at 8 months, I wonder if that means that she tried to care for you as long as she could and only gave you up when she couldn't. That is incredibly sad. My mom was adopted. Her adoptive parents were always very reluctant to give her any information, and they are somewhat estranged, less so these days. When I was in high school, my mom was working in a paper mill and was run over by a forklift. She had to have surgery, and it looked dicey whether she would lose her foot for a while. She didn't. During this period she pressed her adoptive parents for details about her biological parents for medical reasons, and they told her her mother's name and the town she'd lived in. A bit later, my mom called around the town for anyone with the same last name as her biological mother's. She called the first name and number on the list and explained who she was and that she was trying to find information about her biological mother. The woman on the other end of the phone started to cry and said, "Honey, your mom has been looking for you her whole life. It was, I believe, my great aunt. We went back east that summer. We lived in California. My biological grandma lived in Indiana and met my grandma, as well as tons of other relatives. They had a gigantic family reunion with hundreds of people, all of whom seemed to know each other and how everyone was related. I was introduced to a 4th and 5th cousin of mine. It was wonderful for my mom to finally find her own mom and find out what had happened, why she had been given up for adoption. My grandma was an underage single pregnant girl who virtually had her baby taken away, and to meet everyone. I've not kept in real close touch, but mom called grandma every week until she died. So I would say it was very, very satisfying for her. I have a daughter somewhere who was adopted several years ago. My now ex-girlfriend wasn't ready to be a mother, and though I was desperate to figure out some way to keep her, I knew I wasn't capable of doing it on my own. Especially with all the hours I worked at my crappy job. It was the single most painful experience of my life and one of my major regrets. At first, the replies made me a little hopeful that she'd look for me someday, but there seems to be a lot more venom in this thread than I had expected. I was able to write to her for a little while in the first few years, but that window is closed now and I'm just playing the waiting game. I really hope she isn't as bitter or disinterested as a lot of the adopted children in here seem to be. Maybe that's just my own fear about the situation coloring the text. I hope that's all it is. Stop scaring me. Damn it. I wanted this to be more uplifting. I hope she seeks you out. If I were adopted and found out my bio dad cares for me as much as you do for her, I would be ecstatic. You're a good man. Good luck. Hang in there. I was adopted at age 9. I knew my real parents. Let's just say, my real mom still wants to deal drugs and party, so I had to end it so my kids don't think this lifestyle is acceptable. My real dad lost custody of me because he was bipolar, but didn't take meds and drank. Now he is sober and works a good job but lives in the next time zone. My adopted family were past I contacted my real parents. They think it's me just ungrateful, so I was disowned. I just had this experience. I grew up in the US. I have always known that I was adopted from the Philippines and had always known my birth mother's name. Didn't know anything about my biological father, and that's okay. Over Christmas, my parents handed me a bunch of paperwork from my adoption and I searched Facebook for my biological family. Within 2 seconds, I found my birth mother but hesitated in contacting her. I turned 30 this February and decided that as part of starting a new decade, it was the perfect time to reach out to her. I left her a note that asked if she was who I thought she was, and if so, I wanted her to know that I was able to have an excellent life because of her very difficult decision. Our conversation started from there. That same weekend I found out that I was being sent to Australia for a work assignment and was able to plan my first trip back to the Philippines. I met her, spent a week getting to know her better in person and was able to meet a couple of my biological siblings. We've got a long way to go, more stories to share, more visits to plan, and more memories to make. I realize that my story is filled with luck. I'm very lucky to have a loving family that embraced me and raised me well, and I'm lucky to have this newfound connection to my roots. TLDR, I did, and it's been great so far. I found out I was adopted when I was 17. I never really thought much about my birth parents until about 10 years later when it struck me on my birthday that some lady out there who gave birth to me might be thinking about me right then. I found some helpful people on the internet back in 1997 and I ended up finding the dad guy first. He was skeptical at first, but offered to help me find the mom lady. We exchanged pictures and that's when we both knew that I came from him. He was ecstatic. I was apprehensive. See, my parents, the people who adopted me when I was 6 weeks old, are my parents, and I love my dad. I felt guilty talking to this other guy who hasn't done a thing for me in my life and I didn't necessarily want him to either. I had a dad. What the heck was I doing? Too late. The dad guy became obsessed with me. He would call almost daily and just talk for hours. It became burdensome. I didn't know what to do and I handled it poorly by just not calling him back. I know I hurt his feelings. I know I screwed up. I just didn't know what I was doing at the time. I did track down the mom lady. Her and I split the cost of a plane ticket so that I could fly across the country to meet her. I stayed with her and her husband for a week. It was fine. There was no connection for me and I don't think that there was much of one for her either. Her husband was awesome and welcoming. They were very nice people. She took some time one day to explain to me why she did what she did. I didn't really care what her reasons were because I ended up with an awesome family out of the deal, but it was nice to know what the deal was, I suppose. I haven't talked to either of them in years. My dad died about 9 years ago and about 5 years after that, I tried to get back in touch with the dad guy. He didn't really want anything to do with me and I don't blame him. I wasn't very nice. I could have handled it differently. We talked a little bit a couple of times, but that's been it. Haven't talked to the mom lady since. I've thought about dropping her a note in the mail since I can't find an email for her and just letting her know where I'm at these days. I just haven't done it because it's just not important to me. My advice for people who want to find their birth parents is this: make sure that you know what you want. Don't tell yourself some bull story like you need to find them for medical reasons. That's crap. Figure out what it is that you want or what you think that you need from them. Also, remember that it's not all about you. There are other real people with real feelings that will be involved in this. I wish that I had paid more attention to that aspect of all of this. Regardless of my mistakes, you need to respect whatever the other party's reaction and decisions are, whether they be what you want or if they are the opposite. It's not all about you. I am adopted. I never had to track down my birth parents. I've just always known them, I guess. They never stayed together, but they both lived in the same state as me for a while. I would go over to their places with my parents and just have a blast. My parents and my birth parents get along great. My parents and my birth dad's parents don't get along the greatest, but my birth mom's parents even used to send me bonds. I have like $5,000 in bonds from them. They still send me cards for my birthday and stuff. I'm friends with both of my birth parents on Facebook, so I guess I know what's going on in their lives. I know my birth dad better than my birth mom though. I've met him half brother and my birth dad is having another son. My birth mom is a different story. I haven't really talked to her since like 5th grade and I'm in college now, but she does have 2 daughters that I would like to meet someday. If anyone has questions just ask. I don't know what else to really say. Rare elephant strawberry like for good luck, ignore for 11 years of bad luck. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video.